Have you ever looked at someone with undeniable talent, a brilliant scientist, a gifted musician, or a world-class surgeon, and wondered why they aren't wealthy? Or, on the flip side, how a person with no formal education manages to leave behind a multi-million-dollar fortune? We've been fed a lie. We were convinced that if we got an education, if we studied hard, put in the effort, and worked long enough, the world would reward us with riches. We've grown to believe that financial success is the result of pure intellect, polished algorithms, and mathematical precision. But here is the cold, hard truth. Financial success has almost nothing to do with how smart you are, and everything to do with how you behave. In this video, we're peeling back the curtain on the masterpiece by Morgan Housel, The Psychology of Money. We've broken down his 17 most eye-opening lessons into a roadmap that will change your relationship with wealth forever. Because once you realize that money is a psychological battlefield, not a math test, you finally start winning. Lesson 1: No one is crazy. To understand money, we first have to admit one thing. Every financial decision people make makes sense to them at that moment. Think about the lottery paradox. To a wealthy investor, spending $50 a week on lottery tickets is a trivial but useless waste of capital. But for someone living paycheck to paycheck, that ticket might be the only time during the entire week they are legally allowed to dream of a different life. They aren't bad with money. They are buying hope in a context that a wealthy person will never truly understand. We aren't spreadsheet-driven robots. We are emotional creatures shaped by our unique histories. If you grew up during a period of hyperinflation, the idea of saving feels like watching your ice cream melt in the sun. You spend it as fast as you can. If you grew up in a decade of a booming stock market, you see risk as a friend. To see this in action, look at the radical divide between generations. Imagine an investor who came of age during the Great Depression. They watched banks collapse and families lose everything overnight. To them, the stock market isn't an opportunity, it's a predatory monster. Their logic is built on survival and extreme caution. Now compare them to a Gen Z investor who grew up in the era of Bitcoin and viral tech startups. They've seen digital assets go from $0 to $1 trillion in a few years. To them, slow and steady feels like a death sentence, while volatility feels like home. Are they both crazy? No. The Depression-era investor is right within the context of the world they saw. The crypto-native Zoomer is right within the context of the world they see. Their logics are polar opposites, yet both are perfectly rational based on their starting points. We tend to judge others' financial moves through our own lens, forgetting that we are all playing the same game, but on completely different maps. Neither of us is crazy. But here's the problem. Your personal experience with money makes up a tiny fraction of what has happened in the world, but it makes up almost 80% of how you think the world works. But if no one is crazy, why do some people end up with everything while others lose it all? It's because we underestimate the two most powerful invisible forces in the universe, luck and risk. That's where we're going next. We like to think that we are the sole architects of our success, but if we're being honest, there's a silent partner in every financial transaction, luck, and it has a twin brother that no one likes to talk about, risk. So here is lesson 2, luck and risk. Imagine two professional climbers scaling the same peak. One reaches the top and becomes a legend. The other falls because a single rock crumbled under his boot. Was the first climber a genius and the second a failure? No. They both made the same moves, but one met luck and the other met risk. In the financial world, we worship Warren Buffett, but we often forget the story of his former partner, Rick Guerin. Back in the 1970s, Guerin was just as brilliant as Buffett. They invested together, and their returns were identical. But there was one difference. Guerin was in a hurry. He used debt, leverage, to magnify his gains. When the stock market dropped by 70% in the mid-70s, Guerin faced margin calls. He was forced to sell his shares at the bottom of the market just to survive. He pushed his finances to the absolute edge, leaving zero margin for error. Buffett wasn't necessarily smarter than Guerin. He was just more patient and left room for the crumbling rocks of the market. Guerin met risk. Buffett stayed long enough to let luck do its work. The takeaway? Never judge a financial result, yours or others, solely by the outcome. Nothing is as good or as bad as it looks. Lesson 3. The power of compounding. If I asked you what the secret to Warren Buffett's wealth is, you'd probably say investing skills. You'd be wrong. His secret is time. Buffett began serious investing when he was 10 years old. If he had started at age 30 and retired at 60, like a normal person, you would likely have never heard of him. 90% of his massive wealth was generated after his 65th birthday. Compounding isn't about making the highest returns. It's about making pretty good returns that you can stick with for the longest period of time. It's like a snowball. It starts small, almost invisible, but if the hill is long enough, it becomes an unstoppable force of nature. This leads us to the most underrated concept in finance, the room for error. And here is lesson 4. Most people plan for a perfect future. They calculate exactly how much they need to save based on a 7% market return. But the world is messy. Markets crash, pandemics happen, and cars break down. Think of it like a tightrope walker. If you walk across a canyon on a thin wire with no net, you have to be perfect 100% of the time. One sneeze, and it's over. That is exactly what happened to Richard Fuld, the final CEO of Lehman Brothers. For a decade, Fuld was considered a titan of Wall Street, a genius who turned a mid-sized bank into a global powerhouse. But his entire strategy relied on one thing, that the housing market would never stop growing. He pushed the firm's leverage to the extreme, leaving zero room for error in his calculations. He wasn't a bad banker, but he was a banker without a safety net. When the rock crumbled in 2008, his lack of a margin of safety didn't just cause a stumble, it caused a global avalanche that wiped out 150 years of history in a single weekend. Lesson 4 teaches us that being technically right on paper is useless if you go bankrupt before you're proven right. Your safety net is your cash reserve and your humility to admit that the future is unpredictable. It's the gap between what you think will happen and what can happen. We live in a world that is obsessed with the appearance of wealth. We scroll through social media and see the jets, the watches, and the mansions. But this brings us to one of the most counterintuitive lessons in the book. Lesson 5. The Ferrari Paradox. Have you ever seen someone driving a screaming red Ferrari and thought, wow, that guy is cool? The truth is, you probably didn't even look at the driver. You were too busy imagining yourself in the driver's seat. This is the Ferrari paradox. We use wealth to signal to others that we should be liked and admired. But in reality, those people don't admire you. They use your wealth as a benchmark for their own desires. No one is impressed with your possessions as much as you are. If your goal is to gain respect and admiration, be careful. Expensive toys won't buy it. Humility, kindness, and empathy will. Lesson 6. Wealth is what you don't see. This is the lesson that most people miss. We tend to judge wealth by what we see. The cars, the jewelry, the clothes. But that isn't wealth. That is richness. Being rich is a current income. It's what you spend. But wealth is the money that hasn't been spent. It's the optionality. It's the cars not purchased, the diamonds not bought, and the first-class tickets declined. Think of it like a financial iceberg. What everyone sees is the tip, the spending, but the true power of wealth is the massive, invisible block of ice beneath the water. Wealth is the ability to say no to a job you hate or yes to an opportunity you love. It's the silence of a funded bank account. Lesson 7. The Gap of Ego. So, how do you build this invisible wealth? It's not about earning more, it's about wanting less. Lesson 7 tells us that you can build wealth without a high income, but you can never build wealth if you have no discipline. Think of it this way: savings equals income minus ego. Most people increase their lifestyle the moment they get a raise. They buy a bigger house or a faster car. They are running on a hedonic treadmill. They're running faster and faster, but they aren't actually getting anywhere. To build true wealth, you have to keep the treadmill at a steady pace even as your income grows. Lesson 8. Never enough. Why is this so hard? Because of the deadliest trap of all: social comparison. In Lesson 8, we look at the story of people who had everything and lost it because they couldn't find the stop button. They were playing a game where the goalposts kept moving. Imagine you are at a party, and you're feeling great about your $100,000 salary. Then, you find out the guy next to you makes $500,000. Suddenly, you feel poor. But that guy feels poor because the person next to him is a billionaire. The only way to win the game of comparison is to not play it. You have to realize that enough isn't a number, it's a mindset. If you don't have a ceiling for your desires, you will eventually reach a point where you risk what you need to get what you only want. Lesson 9. You and I playing different games. The final piece of this puzzle is understanding that we aren't all playing the same game. If you are a long-term investor, looking for growth over 20 years, why are you listening to the advice of a day trader who only cares about what happens in the next 20 minutes? One of the biggest mistakes people make is taking financial cues from people who are playing a completely different game than they are. It's like a marathon runner trying to keep pace with a 100-meter sprinter. You'll burn out and you'll lose. Know your game, define your enough, and remember that real wealth is the freedom that stays invisible to everyone else. Getting money is one thing, keeping it is another. Many people treat wealth like a sprint, but the winners are those who realize it's an ultra-marathon where the terrain is constantly shifting. To survive, you need more than just a good strategy. You need a specific mental operating system. The following lessons will be about just that. Lesson 10. Getting rich is not the same as staying rich. There are a million ways to get rich, but only one way to stay rich. A combination of frugality and paranoia. Think of it this way. Getting money requires you to be an optimist, to take risks and to put yourself out there. But staying rich requires the exact opposite skill set. It requires humility and the healthy paranoia that what you've built can be taken away from you just as fast as you earned it. Let's look at a real-world example. Many professional athletes sign contracts worth tens of millions of dollars. They are masters at getting rich, but within 5 years of retirement, a shocking number of them are bankrupt. Why? Because they tried to keep the risk-taking mindset that got them the money, instead of switching to the survival mindset needed to keep it. They treated their wealth like a fountain that would never run dry, instead of a reservoir that needs to be guarded. Lesson 11. Success in money isn't about being right all the time. It's about how much you make when you're right, and how little you lose when you're wrong. This is the tail event rule. In the world of venture capital, if a fund invests in 100 companies, they expect 90 of them to fail completely. 9 might do okay, but that one single investment, the tail event, like an early bet on Uber or Amazon, will pay for all the other 99 failures combined. The takeaway for you: you can be wrong about half of your stock picks. You can have a business idea that flops. You can make career mistakes. As long as you don't let the failures wipe you out, you only need a few tail events in your life to achieve massive success. Don't beat yourself up for the 90% that didn't work. Focus on staying in the game long enough to hit the 10%. Next lessons are about reasonable versus rational and the factor of surprise. Academic finance tells us to be rational, to act like cold, calculating robots. But humans have hearts that beat faster when markets crash. Lesson 12 teaches us that it's better to be reasonable than purely rational. A rational person might look at a math equation and decide to invest 100% of their money in the stock market because historically it goes up. But a reasonable person knows they won't be able to sleep at night when the market drops 30%. They keep a useless pile of cash under the mattress. Is it mathematically optimal? No. Is it reasonable because it keeps them from panicking and selling everything at the bottom? Absolutely. Why do we need this? Because of Lesson 13, the surprise factor. The biggest risk is always the one nobody sees coming. We often look at the Great Depression or the 2008 crash to predict the next crisis. But history is not a map, it's a list of surprises. Think about the year 2020. No financial model in the world had global pandemic as a variable. If you only prepare for what has happened before, you are completely defenseless against what has never happened before. Finally, we have to acknowledge two uncomfortable truths about ourselves and the world. Lesson 14 warns us about the end of history illusion. We recognize how much we've changed in the past, but we underestimate how much we will change in the future. The 20-year-old who wants to grind 80 hours a week to be a billionaire is a stranger to the 40-year-old who just wants to see their kids grow up. This is why you shouldn't make extreme financial commitments. Avoid the extreme ends of the spectrum, because the person you are today won't be the person who has to live with those consequences in 10 years. And lesson 15, remember that everything has a price, but not all prices appear on a label. The price of high investment returns isn't just your capital, it's uncertainty, fear, and the gut-wrenching feeling of watching your portfolio turn red. Most people see a market dip as a fine or a penalty, as if they did something wrong. Don't see it as a fine, see it as a fee. It's the admission price for the greatest wealth-building machine on earth. When you pay for a ticket to Disneyland, you don't complain about the price at the gate. You pay it because the experience is worth it. Investing is the same. Volatility is the price of admission. If you can't pay the emotional fee, you can't have the prize. We've talked about the math, the ego, and the survival strategies. But at the end of the day, we have to answer one question. What is it all for? Why all the saving, the discipline, and the sacrifice? Lesson 16. The highest form of wealth. The most powerful value of money, and this is something people often realize too late, is the ability to control your time. Imagine you just got a massive promotion, and your salary has suddenly jumped tenfold. It feels like a dream. You think, this is it, now I'll finally be happy. But a week later, you realize you haven't made it to a single dinner with your family. 2 weeks in, you can't remember the last time you actually had a real conversation with your children. A month passes, and you're suffering from chronic sleep deprivation, snapping at the smallest things. The tasks keep piling up, and the hours spent away from work keep shrinking. After a few months, the truth hits you that 10 times higher salary didn't make you happy. In fact, you've never been more miserable. Why? Because you no longer control your schedule. You no longer own your life. You have become a slave to your desk. The highest dividend money pays is freedom. Wealth isn't about buying stuff. Stuff loses its shine. True wealth is the ability to wake up and say, I can do whatever I want today. It's the flexibility to wait for the right opportunity and the power to be present for the moments that actually matter. If you have $1 million but zero control over your time, you are arguably poorer than someone with $10,000 and a free schedule. As we wrap up, we have to address the loudest voice in the room, pessimism. And here is lesson 17, the seduction of pessimism. Have you noticed that the person predicting a market crash sounds smart and sophisticated, while the person saying things will get better sounds like a naive dreamer? Pessimism is seductive. It sounds like a warning, while optimism sounds like a sales pitch. But here is the reality. Optimism is the only rational long-term strategy. Think back to the dot-com crash in the early 2000s. At the time, the world was filled with headlines saying the internet was a failed experiment. Pessimists looked at the wreckage of thousands of bankrupt companies and said, it's over. But while they were sounding smart in newspapers, the optimists were looking at the ruins and building the next generation. Companies like Amazon, Google, and Netflix, they realized that human ingenuity is the ultimate tail event. We find solutions when we are backed into a corner. Just like the mythical phoenix bird, the economy has a way of rising from its own ashes. Progress happens too slowly to notice, but setbacks happen too fast to ignore. Don't let the loud, scary headlines distract you from the quiet, steady march of human progress. So, here we are. 17 lessons from the psychology of money are done. If there is one thing we want you to take away from this journey, it's this. Managing your money isn't about being the smartest person in the room. It's about having the most discipline. It's about knowing that you aren't crazy, that luck is real, that your ego is your biggest expense, and that freedom is the ultimate goal. Stop trying to master the math and start trying to master yourself, because once you control your behavior, the money will follow. Thanks for watching. If these lessons changed the way you think about your wealth, hit the like button and subscribe. And remember, the best time to start was yesterday. The second best time is right now. We'll see you in the next one.